Hello and welcome to Stop the Crime with me, Alhaji Irbad Ibrahim. And there is no better place to discuss policies that border on our national security than on this platform. And today, I have a very good friend of mine. He is a very important, plank or a central plank within our national security secretariat architecture. He's Director Media and Communications for Operation COVID Safety, and then he is a Chief Legal Advisor to the National Security Secretariat Council, Osei Bonsu Dixon. Sir, good to see you.
Oh, good to see you too, everybody.
You hardly find people in this clandestine or secretive area spend so many nights to author a book. He has his name to this voluminous and impressive book, Principles of Security Law. Dixon Principles of Security Law, and I'm happy to say I reviewed the book on its launch. Was
Absolutely.
it 2018 or
I think it was about
17?
2016.
It was actually
I think the second day of November 2016.
And then I remember Ken Atifwa,
Yes,
Professor Ken Atifwa.
Professor Atifwa, yes.
He was the chairperson at the British Council. He's with NIA
right.
now.
Yes.
Beautiful. So you can get this book. It's still on the shelves. EPP books. And Blue Mall, National Security has got a library where you can go buy this, or a bookshop, and then you can get it on various other bookstores and also online. Patronize it so that we encourage council to write some more about its experience in this area. And in due course, we'll also talk about a key role he plays on matters of security governance and the initiative in that regard. Council, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Council, how have you been generally?
Oh, not bad, Alaji. I mean, I think it's been I would say, a journey towards building a country's resiliency, in several domains, particularly in aspects of security law, and then also in issues to do with border security or border security, cyber security, maritime security, and the administration of justice matters. So those have been some of the pervasive matters that I've been quite engaged with over the last, last 3-4 years. And beyond that, the matters that almost all of us in this country are today constrained by issues to do with COVID. So, as you said, I'm involved directly with our response. I'm the secretary to the Operation COVID Committee. So we mainly look at how we bring to security grips the issues that the Ghana Health Service must attend to. But there are security implications, whether one is looking at quarantining, one is looking at isolationism, one is looking at face masks as a policy for the country. So those are matters of policy that we are largely involved with.
Council, now your eyes see a lot and your ears hear a lot. Somebody will tell you when I go into intel and security, the extent of conversation with even my wife, my spouse has to be limited because if I don't take care, I will let state secrets out, classified, information out. How has that impacted your social interaction with family and with people? Because if you talk for 30 minutes continuously, if care is not taken, you will let the cat out of the bag.
Not at all. I think that is the importance of training. We have been at this work for the last 23 years, so it's something of second nature. So the matters that we talk about are into two categories. There are matters that are for the public consumption, which are needful. The matters to do with governance, for example, there's security governance in that respect. There are matters to do with confidential issues, which are to do with operational matters. Those are the things that you don't go about. I give you a typical example. So for me as a lawyer, you have confidentiality with your client. So you can discuss anything. You can discuss maritime law, you can discuss matrimonial law, you can discuss contract law, but you will not discuss matters of confidence that you have discussed with a specific client and put it out in the public domain. You are a cleric. You hear matters that have to do with the social disposition of people, and confidential matters have been brought to your attention. you can advise on matters to do with morality, matters to do with social conduct and behavior, but it will be entirely out of proportion to discuss the nitty-gritties of matters that have come to you in confidence. So I think it becomes second nature. It gets in your blood. You know what to talk about and what to. And if you even questions were to be asked, you are at liberty to say that these are matters of matters I would not want to make a comment about. I mean, and it's permissible by law. The law actually permits you to do that. And then also in practice, like I said, it gets into your blood. So at no point would you, if you work with me, you would realize that certain questions I will not answer. And, or maybe I might say that, well, these are, how do you call it, we can't talk about these matters. So there are issues that we are, and the country is undergoing a lot of flux. So for example, in 2016, this country executed an agreement with the United States government and to look at security governance. It gave birth to an agreement we call the Joint Country Action Plan, and therefrom there were a number of things that we ought to look at as a country. One was cyber security, border security, maritime security, and administration of justice. The middle name of what we're doing was called governance, Security Governance Initiative. And I've told a lot of people that governance implicates inclusivity, accountability. It includes some openness, dialogue, and things like that. Meaningful understanding to carry the citizenry with you. If you can't do that, I mean, if you talk about stopping crime, but you need the public to inform you. If they don't understand what they should inform you about, or what number they should call, why they should call, what is their role, why should they be involved in this? I'm not sure you're getting far. But if you have to talk about operational matters that the police is, I think you have to be circumspect. Because you'll be giving the cat out of the bag, like you said.
Exactly.
So it comes with experience and professional.
Counsel, you've now become the face of Blue Gate, so to speak. You've revolutionized how we understand national security, because at first a knock on your door from national security meant you had run into trouble. So it puts a lot of burden of responsibility on you as an individual. Does that make your desk in the office much more cluttered than your predecessors who served in various capacities?
A very interesting question. And so I think that in every dispensation and every governance system, and security is part of the governance systems of the country. And so the president sets the tone, the type of administration that he wants, the understanding that he wants this country to get into. It filters through to the ministers, to the coordinators, and things like that. So this office, my office, is set up by an express agreement to discuss these matters. In fact, we actually have one of the largest security dialogue meetings every 6 months. All people who matter in security actually attend that type of meeting. It is the largest in the country. So academics come, journalists come, people in security come, people who can influence the pattern and the tempo of security and the understanding of these matters. So what I can say is that so there's a general understanding from the top, from the president, the vice president downwards to the ministers, that aspects of our risk management involve the public's own obligation. If you expect better policing, there is an obligation on the part of the public to contribute to it. If you want a more secure state, there's a public obligation. So I'll give you a typical example. In countries like Germany, where when they were faced with terrorism, one of their response mechanisms was to deepen this type of engagements. And they realized, for example, that generally the average man would be forthcoming to the police, would inform, about unusual behavior. They would take particular note of maybe a color of dress a person was wearing, the manner of speech, all those kinds of things, and report them. In Ghana today, thankfully, that has improved. Average Ghanaian has become much more engaging with law enforcement. They bring information, they know where to go, because we've created the architecture and the systems for it. But in the past, it wasn't so. And so these things and programs like yours have also helped to amplify these and also to demystify certain aspects that previously. And so in previous encounters, I'm not sure, but we've been trained also. Coming into my job, I was trained for this type of engagement and to and then also to bring my own equities or understanding of the subject matter, where my expertise are according to issue to help to clarify matters.
Okay, that's beautiful. We'll go into the response we've had over the past 2 months,
Right.
especially against the spread of COVID-19.
Okay.
But first of all, I would like to ask you, where do we place our priority list in terms of security? Burkina Faso is not looking too good. The Sahel region isn't looking too good. Terrorism across the sub-region is a concern. There are issues of food security and other issues, interfaith dialogue and all that. Then Corona came into the picture. How would you itemize our priorities currently as a country in terms of our national security interests?
Okay, so I mean, so it's a vital. I think the question itself is a very important question. I mean, and you would see that, how do you call it, your cues must also be from the commander-in-chief. And so the president's preoccupation right now has been how he can constrain and maintain our grip on COVID as much as we can, and to mobilize the country towards that effort. So all over the world, not only Ghana, all over the world, the issues of bio-threat or biodefense have become a very important or elemental part of security dialogue, security conversations, and security preparedness, response, preparedness, prevention, and things like that. So if you come to talk about today as I think that the most primary of threats that we face is the bio-threat coming from the COVID-19. Why is it so? Because it has constrained the private sector. It has constrained the public sector. It has manacled also normal day-to-day activity. The economy of most countries has slowed down. Our trading partners, our partners in West Africa and outside West Africa, the whole of Africa and the outside world have been constrained. So all these things have a lot to do with. And when we talk about security, I mean, we no longer define security in a very close circuit sense, where we are dealing with either police or those sense are old-fashioned definitions. We're dealing with the complexity of risk that a country can be predisposed to, that have the same impact to bring maximum damage. I mean, so this has caused the GDP of countries to slow down. It has also brought death, and it has also brought property issues into issue. I mean, there are a lot of people who, for example, might complain about, in some parts of the world, about people breaking into their shops because thieves are also at work around this time. That's why the police must keep vigilance left and right. Even though, whilst a lot of people have withdrawn, there's a space for others to occupy. So there's other forms of threats have also been amplified. I mean, one can talk about cyber issues, for example. In the UK, for example, people are talking about, in the US also, people are talking about domestic violence rising and all those things. I don't know the figures as it is right now for Ghana, but I will not be surprised that in circumstances where people have to be constrained into rooms and all those things, then the offenses that they commit will be proportional or perpendicular to all those type of environment that they find themselves. So you'll find that most people will be, you would have domestic violent activities more pronounced than you would even find robberies. But when you allow people to go into the streets and all those, and then there are more people who open shops and people can break into, people can, a whole lot of things like that.
Counsel, well, you mentioned national security. People are looking at the kinetic stuff. You know, the iron and metal or iron and block stuff. Let's go here, we need equipment for this or that.
Right.
But the soft issues like shortage of water.
Right.
Does national security do some of those outreach, initiatives, drilling of boreholes, engaging people?
Right.
Those things that are far away from the barrel of the gun, do they fall within the purview of national security?
They do. And I would say that, so when you constitute national security, there are two senses in which one might. So one might be talking about national security in a narrow sense as a ministry, for example. Or one might be talking about national security in a broader sense as in the community. So the national security community. If you look, for example, or have regard to Article 84, Article 84 gives you the whole gamut of the National Security Council and tells you that, I mean, the decisions on the threat, the risk to Ghana are determinable by that particular group. And in there, we are part of that particular group. In fact, we form an elemental part of that group, but we are by no means part of that group. So the concerns of the ordinary Ghanaian are brought to the fore in such an arena, and the issues to do. So those things that you talk about are the issues we call human security concerns. And so the definition of national security, like I earlier said, has migrated beyond the barrel issue, the barrel of a gun matter, to consider those things that are so minute, atomistic, affects the individual, such that it makes him uncomfortable, it causes public discontent, disgruntled, and can be the fulcrum around which people gather to have problems. So, for example, I mentioned the community because even if we maybe for now you hear that the police is not having a certain type of response that they need, maybe health response that they need, we would consider those things as information or intelligence depending on it. And then I funnel that one to the appropriate agents within the community, our little village, national security village or community, and tell them that this area might so liaise with maybe Ghana Water Company and please sort this thing out. Coming from us, they will attach a certain degree of significance to it. The fire service can help. The military itself can also help. And we've seen it in diverse ways. Police sometimes has gone on, to support the community on. It might be a health issue, like I said, and they might move on. So when we do that, then it will become something that catalyzes the response quickly, because normally our directives, or maybe not directives, our information disseminations to those organizations are treated with a certain levity. So such people would then attend more quickly than they would, so human security concerns are, and the present administration places human security concerns as very, very important. And so, for example, back in 2016, when the Security Governance Initiative, it was executed by the previous administration, the NDC administration. But when the NPP also came in, they also had a good look at it. And they looked at it, and one of the things that was important was whether it answered human security concerns. Cyber security is something, if people can actually, you talk about mobile money, for example, or people can talk about transfer of funds, and people can divert people's funds just using cyber technology that's now openly available. It will affect a whole lot of businesses. It will affect individuals and things like that. So cyber security was given, the box was checked. Maritime security. Our fishermen, for example, are at the peril of these people, pirates and sea robbers and all sort of people. So this is a human, it affects jobs, the security of jobs and all those things. If you take that aside, one might talk about administration of justice matters. So these are some of the pillars of the Security Governance Initiative program that, like I said, from previous government, but the current government evaluated it and said, look, this is an important element. To have a secure state, we need it. In the United States, for example, when the Trump administration also came, they did a similar thing also. This agreement was signed under Obama, the Joint Country Action Plan. They reviewed it and did not want to change it because it answered to they are interested also in maritime matters. They have companies that are working in the maritime space. It will be disingenuous on their part to say that, well, you are on your own kind of thing. Cyber, they are hit by other countries outside their jurisdiction who are using scams, romance scams, internet scams, hacking and all those things, So they couldn't do nothing. They said, look, this affects our citizens.
Yes.
You go to administration of justice issue. The more you have a rule of law-based society, the more it is better, it helps you to focus on the deliverables of the state. Otherwise, you spend all your money chasing criminals.
Exactly.
And what do you get out of it?
I agree with you. I'm happy you are excited about the Security Governance Initiative, and I know you are the coordinator and you play an important role. We'll discuss that. As the world finally tries to bid good riddance counsel to COVID-19,
right.
We're a third world country, and
right.
Of course, we know our capabilities are not like the capabilities in Langley in Virginia or at the Pentagon. You talked about biological threats.
Right.
And coronavirus is seen as a bio threat. from where we sit as a third world country, apart from Noguchi doing tests
Right.
and the Kumasi Center doing tests, are we adding to the body of laboratory knowledge from a national security point of view as to the origin, the mode of transmission of this virus, and how the world can immune itself from future bio threats? Or ours is just America is doing this, let's do it. Europe is doing this, let's do that.
Okay. So, not so. So, what countries do, or what we're beginning to see a pattern in which states actually build an integrated system where their institutions talk to each other. And so, for example, what you mentioned, I mean, Lanley, and then you mentioned maybe Scotland Yard and all those things, they would interconnect with centers of research that are giving them understanding about something. So the Center for Disease Control in the United States works under the executive. The executive has a constellation of entities that it works with, of which one is the defense. So biodefense, for example, the understanding is that you can deploy virulent viruses that can be disruptive of a state without firing even a single weapon. So in essence, a bio threat is something which concerns the defense sector or the security sector. They communicate and bring these into the fore, and then the security or security agency also picks it up and begin to understand it and do one thing that they are good at, which is early warning signals, so that we're beginning to see a threat emerge in this. The pattern of previous threats were that even though they seem far off, because of global connectivity through
aviation and all that,
it's just a matter of weeks. You can predict that various nations will report a same pattern of disease. And so, for example, in 1918, when the Spanish flu occurred, Africa did not get it first, but it was introduced to East Africa by a ship that contained people who sailors would come, and they started infecting the East African population. And before long, West Africa and other places of Africa were all infected. Our first disease encounter was from Norway, somebody from Norway and France or so. So these people had come. So it was imported. It wasn't as if Ghanaian had actually, we had any this kind of disease. So people started introducing these kinds of things. But how did you do it? Through aviation, air travel. I mean, within 6 hours, he's here. Within 12 hours, he's flown here. Wow. So within 12 hours, right? If you want to go to the north, you might need about 14 hours. Within 12 hours, somebody would have left
across the Atlantic
and be here. And you are coming with a what's it called? A whole farrago of passengers who are coming in. And you can imagine what will happen to you right after it. So we are very much interested also in the study of epidemiology issues, pandemic matters, and increasingly understanding how these things implicate security issues, so that you don't think about health only, you think about health threats, you think about bio threats, you think about... now there's something that I need to mention. So for example, somebody like me, I specialize in international law matters and also in interstate risk. So I'm interested, for example, in what is called CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. Now, it might sound at the first instance, oh, but why be concerned with nuclear? Why be concerned with radiological? Why be concerned with biological? So chemical, people are bringing chemicals to this country. Some of the chemicals, mixed with other chemicals, can be very, 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 very dangerous. Biological threats. People are bringing fruits, animals. Human beings are carriers of anything, pathogens and all those things. And so two people come to Ghana. They come with a pathogen. It affects the population. It's a community spread. We've seen it, you understand? So all these things tell us that. So CBRN matters matter. The radiological threats, the nuclear threats. We are beginning to see terrorists think about how they can be more sinister with the population. So and these materials are things which are conflict areas and all those things. So our whole purview about these things have changed, I would say, drastically. In the past, maybe about 20, 30 years, we are much more fixated with other threats, maybe other threats. But today we are concerned with what is called emerging and new threats. So those are the things where I'm interested in, I mean, the new threat horizon, and some of them are the biological threats that we are seeing. So how do we prepare for it? How do we respond to it? Those are some of the issues.
Council, we are in this country and we know how things operate. When government has to spend an extra buck to keep all of us safe, that issue will be, and we will engage in a long drawn-out discussion on radio as to the merits and demerits. You find politicians with no single knack as to what security is try to read the budget that is used to purchase a warplane or a helicopter. As you sit, as a very young, fresh pair of sleeves with such, broadened horizon on what our threats should be and what our preparedness should be, how have you been able to communicate this
to
the state? And how much of a challenge has the partisan bickering affected our response to these emerging threats?
Okay, so the first thing I'd like to say is that, I'm not a fresh pair of sleeves. I mean, I've been working for decades. I mean, for more than 2 decades.
2 decades.
So that's not at all somebody who is new to this arena. So
the ideas are really fresh.
But they've been filtering around for a long time now. We've been having engagement with our partners, both in and outside, for a long time.
Yes, sir.
And so, from where I sit, a lot of them are not new. So I'll give you an example. I mean, I mentioned CBRN. CBRN is, how do you call it, something that the United Nations UN Council Resolutions 1540, for example, which comes under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, mandates that countries, ensure that they put in proper mechanisms. I've talked about issues, for example, but the biological threat. Now, why? Because the International Health Regulation 2005, which came into effect in 2007, requires, and Ghana is a signatory, that we actually pay attention to how we put a system to prepare, to prevent, and to respond to these things. Now, when it comes to...
And do you know why I said it's new? With these biological threats and the, ratifications we have done, Council, May 9 happened. We're talking about casualties less than 200 or less than 300. Ghana was struggling. And then we go to hospitals, there are no beds. We talked about the no bed syndrome for a long time. Constituencies just actually had ambulances. So if these ideas you are sharing around this table are not fresh, how can you convince us that your predecessors were actually working on this dossier and we've made any progress?
So the point is that, I mean, some of the ideas, like I said, the ideas themselves are not new. Is implementation, for example, that requires resources, you understand. So it depends on also the pattern of resource allocation. So sometimes, I mean, like it happens in our daily lives. Okay?
Yes, sir.
I entered your place and I saw that some people were not wearing masks themselves. And I was a bit miffed that why were you not wearing all those things? Until somebody gets it, maybe perhaps the message will not be drawn home as needful. So at a national level, sometimes it's understandable that, one, the ideas might not be new. Because 2005, you signed an international health regulation that asks you to do biosurveillance. It's there. These words are not new. They are there. So for those in the community who understand what I'm talking about, they can relate to it that, yes, Ghana signed on to it. 2000. I'm talking about something that happened roughly about 15 years ago. I'm not talking about something which is 5 years, 10 years. I'm talking about 15 years ago. You understand? We are party to it. UN Council Resolution 1540. When was it signed? That was decades ago. We are still party to it. I was, for example, I was in Addis Ababa, I think, about a year ago, and our discussion there was to do with like CBRN, chemical, biological, nuclear, and radiological. It's nothing new. My predecessors have been on it, and they have been doing incremental work. But normally, what happens is that it's like progress. Some things happen and pushes everybody out of jobs, and then what must be done is then done. Sometimes I've seen it happen. So nothing happens. So it's what's wasted effort. So for example, if you talk about biological preparedness, every country might be stockpiling some amount of biological, maybe things like PPEs and things like that. You understand? But even the most advanced of countries
struggle with
it. I mean, they said they didn't have ventilators, they didn't have this. We said we didn't have enough ventilators.
Yeah.
But let me ask you, how many people are sitting in ICU as we speak?
Yes,
Almost very few.
Yeah, but I was in ICU. Intensive care unit.
Intensive care
unit. Yes, and I
but
saw
I'm
the
talking
conditions.
about, exactly. But
super expensive, sir.
super expensive.
Yes, not meant for the ordinary person.
Not meant for the ordinary
you
person.
understand.
Yes.
So healthcare delivery is so expensive.
But you and I can predict that, given the primacy of the threat that we have faced today,
yes, sir.
it would bring in a whole lot of sea change. One, ventilators has become a common word now.
Yes.
Most hospitals will see the need for it. Why? Because it is possible that another pandemic might happen. It is also possible that nothing might happen, but it's possible also that, like we've been told by the World Health Organization or the Ghana Health Service, that this might be with us for some time. And so now countries will pay attention to it. The World Health Organization itself was not well prepared when the pandemic struck, the way it struck. It took them time for them to say that, well, this is going to be a global pandemic. But at the time that they had done it, the international effort itself. So let me give you an example. What has been the regional effort from ECOWAS? What has been the regional effort
almost
from...
zilch,
yes.
almost nothing.
Yes, but not
His
entirely.
Excellency the President today, the conference,
Yeah, but not entirely.
a video conference, you know,
So
interaction with other
ECOWAS
heads
has
of
come
state.
together. They're saying that, well, they have President Buhari, for example, who will lead, how do you call it? That's
The effort.
It's an effort, but it has to be something that is followed up on, concretized, strengthened, enriched, and so that we can see the usefulness of it. It's difficult in terms of interstate relations to see things being done. The European Union had a similar problem. If you come to the African Union, for example, but we're now beginning to see the Africa CDC, the Africa Center for Disease Control. So, rev up and do it.
We go for our first commercial break, and when we come back, I'll ask Council Osei Bonsu-Dixon. At the time people are talking big on the things we need to do for our national security interest, the ordinary Ghanaian is concerned about bread and butter issues, and even roads as part of national security. Somebody said, is it roads we will chop? We'll come back shortly. Council Osei Bonsu-Dixon is Director, Media and Communications, Operation COVID Safety for the Republic of Ghana. He's also a Chief Legal Advisor to the National Security Secretariat. Council, we live in a country where people take breakfast and don't know where their lunch is coming from. You are talking about Nkrumah. You saw Atomic Energy Agency here in Accra. Nkrumah was light years ahead of his contemporaries. We know that there are enriched, radioactive or uranium, equipment that were shipped out of the country at some point in relation to the threats we face as a country. How do we tag the population along? Okay. You're talking fine grammar about how Ghana can be better prepared a decade from now or 2 decades from now and the things we need to do. But my grandma is thinking, how will we take and pursue this evening? So how do we conscientize the nation about the need to spend more, because it is taxpayer money that will resource some of the nice initiatives you are talking about.
No, so a lot of, like I said, I mean, building a country and the how do you call it, the understanding of a country on certain things happens at different levels. So my communication with you is meant for certain kind of communities. A certain community of interest must understand where we stand with these matters, and so that is it. That same communication will be broken down into very small bits for people who, like a grandmother, for example, must relate to security from a different perspective, from the bread and butter aspect, which is equally very important. So those things would maybe food security, health security, and all those kinds of things. I mean, so those communications are important. People are concerned about, but there are some matters that are for example, if you're dealing with crime, we have an agency in this country that deals with crime. That's the police. It's a national security job. We don't do crime, we understand. The crime issues are police. So under Act 350, for example, so we educate people to understand that the prevention, the detection, the constraining of crime is the police. The police is the country for that. You want something that transcends policing efforts, is where you bring it to the national security. But you don't divest them of their primary obligation, because they have a legal mandate under the law. So those things are things that incrementally everybody must understand. So those ones we would have a general discussion about. But if you meet people who have a certain depth of understanding, the communication and the discussions are at a very sophisticated level. What we are doing is largely a bit more intellectual and has that sophistication. We deal with countries, right? We deal with nation states. Exactly. We are country among countries. And if our understanding is still at MPC, Bankun level and all those kinds of things, whilst others are going to the moon and talking about
a space force. Iran also just shot a military satellite into space.
And the other countries, this is the kinds of sophistication that they are. People are thinking about, for example, the Moon Convention and whether they can station other. And so, for how long will our country always be the hewers of water,
drawers of water,
in terms of poverty of ideas? You understand? Because other countries can just deploy them class 1 people to come and deal with us intellectually, because we are not sophisticated. So our country needs various structures. There are people who are working on, for example, immunology. There are professors. I've got a good professor I talk to almost every day, who's a virologist. And our discussions are, but it's largely because I'm interested in biological matters. So I don't need to be a biologist, but there's an interface between biology and also preparedness, security, and all those things.
Right.
I'm a lawyer. I specialize on international law. So I specialize on international defense law, international collective law. I'm a member of the International Society for Military Law. Our discussions are so people want to deploy autonomous weapons. If they won't wait for you just because you are concerned with going to the farm or something, because then you prepare yourself for the next range of colonizers to come and take over. You understand? So if you are discussing things, let me see, at the university level, the depth is different from when you are doing at the kindergarten level. But when the same professors can go to the kindergarten. So when we go to meet people who are discussing, for example, bread and butter matters, we are at pains to then draw their attention to certain facts that food security is important. The work that you do in the fields are important. That the rises in food prices, it ends up in inflation. Inflation can have certain consequences. We're interested in food security. Why? Because you know what happened when people are hungry. A hungry man is an angry man. He hasn't got time to listen to you. Exactly. We don't have food. We have a food glut in Ghana. We've had situations where food is, it's been reported copiously that some food is still in farms and all those things.
Exactly.
So what does it tell us? We must analyze that and know that if you don't take action now, that the same people will not go and plant anything. So you should prepare for a boom and a bust and a boom and a bust. So you don't want that kind of situation in your country. Others, I would say, for example, deal with certain aspects about security is broad. So people deal with other aspects.
Yes,
I deal with the international dimensions of our interstate relations and all the border issues. So COVID-19 is COVID-19 is clearly one of those border issues. They transcend the border.
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
those things. So
agree.
those are things which are.
Council, now I would want to zero down to COVID in our response. We know there are isolation centers. There is a lot of hue and cry about Ghanaians that are marooned or stranded elsewhere, and the fact that the Terminal 3 should be opened for international flights to bring back our nationals and all that. A friend of mine returned from Russia. He said you gave him 2 weeks. Or national security gave him 2 weeks. Okay, we are going to quarantine you and all that. We'll take samples. After 2 weeks, there was agitation in the hotel. Then you asked me to be here for only a fortnight. So how much of a challenge has it been getting people to comprehend the need for us to go through these difficult times? How have you been handling isolation, contact tracing? Look, a highly placed source has told me when people get wind of being contact traced, they run before the team gets there. So how much of a challenge has this whole potpourri of issues been for national security?
It's not a very easy mix, but what I can say is that I think we've been largely very successful. And so the very few cases are quite isolated cases. They are not the mainstream. They are not the norm. I mean, like things are not at all. Majority of the matters are matters for.
In
So
the
you
age
have
of social media, sir.
yes. So
You
that's
saw
I'm
what
saying.
happened on the USS Mercy, and the warship and the captain, leading to the resignation of the Navy commander because he didn't speak to him well.
Exactly.
We've seen videos, sir, on social media about Ghanaians who flew into the country. They were put under isolation. Soldiers were not
Yes,
handling them
I'll
well.
finish answering the
Yes,
question.
yes, yes.
So what I'm saying is that those are not they are isolated cases. And
Isolated, you still
yes.
insist.
Yes,
Okay.
isolated. They are not your everyday kind of reaction.
Okay,
That's what I'm
counsel.
trying to get. I mean, so you might have one or two people who are hungry in this, what's it called, studio, and who might make noise. That is normal. We're not planning for paradiso. We're not planning
A
for a
perfect
perfect
situation.
circumstance. That is why we're trained. So we must also, and please do also understand that there are psychological issues implicit in quarantining. So when you see those kinds of issues, they must draw your attention to the need for social psychologists, whom we have relegated to the background in this country for far too long. Not only the medical doctors or the clinicians, but you also need people who understand psychiatric matters. Some of the people that we are contacting might have psychiatric problems. The history might show that this is not the first time. Do you understand? So, and I would caution that. I mean, seeing a video, you don't know the person's history. You're dealing with a psychiatric situation, or you're dealing with somebody who's perfectly normal, but is maybe unhappy or aggrieved about the situation. It's acceptable to us because we can deal with
Because
those
they feel
circumstances.
caged, they feel
caged.
crammed and hemmed in.
Hemmed in.
Yes.
So those issues, we know ahead of time that there will be a few fixtures or people who want to bust out and all those ones. The point of the matter is not about people. The point of the matter is our preparedness, our response, and things like that. Now, let me give you a good example.
Yes,
so
sir.
we've had situations where a lot, like I said, about 90%. So you have one or two situations like that.
Yes, sir.
And we are not trained to go and deal with psychological matters. So those are matters for references to doctors, clinicians who specialize in psychiatry and all those things. And we bring them on board. So sometimes also, in terms of the planning, as you continue to do something, you become an adept at it. So we now know the kind of people who we must embed in our response teams. We don't only send medical doctors, we send people who can talk to, we send psychologists first, who can deal with the matter. Apart from that one to the communication, I'm the director also for communication. So we also look at how we message to people. So it's not about you are going to be in quarantine for 14 days. No, you're going to be in quarantine for a minimum of 14 days. If there are issues, which the doctors claim that there are issues, then it is not because we don't go, we are not doctors, so we find that security people are just there to make sure that something doesn't bad happen. We live in a situation where terrorism is still there. So if people mass up at a place, it's our duty to ensure that we don't wait until something happens before we say, okay, oh, where's the police person? Where are military people to support us? Assuming somebody brings a gun and starts spraying people at the place, what do we do? So all those ones, all those eventual, I remember somebody asking me a question that, oh, but why are there soldiers here? And I said, look, but has terrorism gone away?
Right.
Have all these bad people who just wake up psychologically annoyed, and he's got all these people, Mazda participants, you know, so we prepare adequately and give instructions to all those. Now, different people do different jobs. So if you find security arrangements, they are well planned with other people who would respond, for example, to psychological issues. You won't send me to go and talk to somebody who is who is livid about the fact that he has been there for more than, that's not my job. But you will send me to look at some of the legal issues that will come. You would send me to look at, for example, how do we message to these people? How do we communicate with external bodies? What agreements do we enter into them? We take facilities, so what is the agreement that we enter in? And if there are problems should crop up there, what liability would accrue? And all those kinds of things. Those are things which professionals look at.
Counsel, quite a brilliant response, because I learned at the Pentecost, Isolation Center. People say, "Why yesterday jollof, today too jollof." The complaints are too many. I'm happy you've deployed a slew of professionals, including psychologists, to people in social work.
Oh, yes,
but sadly,
yes.
these really soft social sciences are the least respected.
I don't know why, but I can ask you why, because I don't know why they are, because all over the world, I know that when it comes to people who attend to the health needs of people, they are prioritized. I don't see why social workers here, except to say that historically, I mean, I remember those days when in university, and if you were to tell somebody that you were studying social, what are you doing?
In Kenya, you see, social, yeah, that was what they would say. Anybody in the social sciences would just be sleeping.
So you might even...
Does the change of a narrative fall within your purview as well? Because you are matching industry with academia, and your boss says, these are the sets of skill sets I would want like to produce for us. KNUS to UCC to produce for us. Would you advocate that long-term interface?
Oh, I think that the country must plan. I mean, ultimately, short of, I mean, in a market economy, so there are two types of economies that exist. A centralized economy that is planned, a planned economy, centralized, and a market-based economy, But we have learned actually that Adam Smith's theory is not entirely applicable and has to be modified. And so even the countries that actually preach pure capitalism, they're the same countries that actually offer a lot of welfare support to people. Now when it comes to how we train people, I think that it's important, like, we actually assess our needs as a country and then put a lot of effort where it's needed. So I'll give you a typical example. Girl child education, for example, I've seen that, how do you call it? Back in the day, about 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
That was the chorus of the day. And now the girls, when you go to the university,
they outnumber the men. And back in the day, today sometimes I see law has become the new MBA. Everybody is doing law and all those things. Yes, there's some merit in it. It's a powerful discipline. It gives you anchorage in every dimension of, it can help you to shape up how you help your country, your state, yourself, your organization, and all those things. Because it gives you full grips of rules. It gives you of policy matters, quick appreciation, critical thinking, on your feet, and all those ones. But do we need everybody
to be a lawyer
and all those things? That's another issue. Or do we need scientists, or do we need managers, or do we need... So the state of our country, what do we need? Now, it's not something that, I mean, we are also part of the society. So in here I'm speaking my own mind. I think that it's something which maybe our National Development Planning Commission might want to look at.
Council Osei Bonsu-Dixon, he is Director, Media and Communications Operation, COVID Safety, and also a Chief Legal Advisor to Ghana's National Security Secretariat. Council, it's been a great pleasure having this intellectual intercourse with you, and we hope to see you again. So we come your way next week with another edition of Stop the Crime. Stick to home-based television all the time. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.